good night, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Lewwe Chat. So tonight is going to be a very special night. You know, last week we had relationship goals part one, and it was such a interesting discussion. It was so, it was so overwhelming. The response was so overwhelming. So thank you everyone who called in last week and was a part of the discussion. We really appreciate it. So tonight I have with me Shamar, and we have Tiana. Good night, Shamar and Tiana. How y'all doing tonight?
Hi, good night, man.
Good night.
I'm doing well.
Good, good. Happy to have you here. This is your first time on Lewwe Chat. Hope y'all not
Good to be
nervous.
here. I'm good.
Great. So good night to everyone else who is joining us tonight on YouTube. Keep that chat with the discussion. We're gonna go further into relationship goals part two with Dr Denise Charles. Yeah. So last week we would have asked a lot of questions and we received a overwhelming response from everyone. Yeah. So just want to thank everyone again for actually participating. So relationship goals part two. Last week we spoke a lot about the toxic relationships and cheating that affects relationships and what a toxic relationship really is. We kind of ended with how it looks in a healthy relationship. So we're just going to start right there. Shamar and Tiana, just want to get your perspective on what a healthy relationship should look like.
Well, for me, a healthy relationship should be based upon trust and having common goals. So it's about you as a partner being someone that special person in your life can depend on, and you can accept them through all phases. Never perfect, so you need to be able to accept them and love them during the bad times as well as during the good times as well. So for me, being in a healthy relationship is all about working together to bring out the best in each other.
Yeah, and I also agree with Shamar as well. Loyalty, trust, sound, communication. Just working together with each other and just growing.
Yeah, that's definitely, you both have touched some valid points. Good night, Sierra and Mario. If anyone is on your stream, let us know. Say good night. I see everybody shouting out Tiana, you real popular. Good night, Brad. Good night. Yeah, so thank you everyone for joining. So let us know your thoughts of what a healthy relationship should look like. A healthy romantic relationship. Let us discuss this. Yeah. Basically we ended on that, and we really want to get into the next step. I know a lot of young people, a lot of persons, a lot of couples, even if you're single, looking to get married at some point in life. And we don't really have, not all of us have the mentorship of marriage and that relationship should look, or the steps you should take in order to get married, and to kind of rule out those misconceptions of marriage, because there's a lot, right? So that's what we really want to get into tonight. So Shamar, Tiana, when it comes to marriage, what do you expect that to look like for you?
You want to go first, Tiana? Ladies first.
What do I expect? I think first thing first, in any marriage or relationship, I believe that you should have that level of best friend bond where, as Shamar touched, if I'm going through something, I can go and I can discuss, what I'm feeling, and for me, a marriage is just like being reliant on each other, trusting each other, going through trials and tribulations, just growing together under one roof. So that's my take on what I think a strong marriage should be.
Okay, so have either of you ever been married?
No.
Married? No. So how y'all know what marriage should look like?
Well, a lot of what we learn about marriage, or
Yeah,
what we think we know about marriage, is based on, I guess, what we see in TV, or learn from
yeah,
young,
yeah.
bloody stories and stuff.
Mm,
But for me, marriage is about getting to know yourself
mm,
and someone else on the deepest level possible. Because when you become married, you now have to think about someone else as deeply and as passionately as you think about yourself.
right.
So all the romantic stuff is fine, but it calls for a deeper level of selflessness. So I think I think that's why sometimes it could be intimidating for a lot of people
Mm,
to not even consider being married, because there's a definite level of selflessness that you do need. So to me, I think that's what marriage really is about being selfless and loving someone and loving yourself as well throughout the journey, because it's a journey. I think sometimes a lot of times what we think is that once you get married, you have the honeymoon, it's happy ever after.
mm,
But as we all know, that's not the reality. So I think it's about recognizing that this is a journey that you are on with someone in a life journey, a lifelong journey, and you really need to be committed on being better yourself personally, and also trying to get that partner to be better as well.
it's very true. Very true. Yeah, and we have Dr. Denise Charles with us tonight. Hi, Dr. Charles. How are you doing? So glad that you're here with us.
I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm doing quite well. Quite well.
Nice
Thank
to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
No problem. So just going to tell you guys a little bit about Dr. Charles. So she's the author of Your Baby is Coming Now Push, have how to have mind-blowing sex without losing your brain, and Tonight I'm About to Play, celebrating seasons of change. She's an experienced educator who has taught for several years from secondary to tertiary levels. She holds a doctorate in educational leadership with high commendation from the University of the West Indies, and is also a qualified trainer. She is currently employed by the Ministry of Education, Technological and Vocational Training as an education officer. Dr. Charles is a certified and experienced counselor and relationship coach. So y'all know where to go. And together with her husband Gabriel, she's their founders of Better Blend Relationship Institute, registered charity since 2008. The institute regularly presents seminars across Barbados and focuses on relationship education, marriage, and family life, personal. Her articles and videos have been widely featured internationally. She has appeared on several relationship shows both locally and abroad, including Rogers TV Toronto, of course, Live New York. So that's just a little bit about Dr. Charles. She has done so much over the length of time she's been engaging with marriage and counseling and all that. So Dr. Charles, I know I would have just said a little bit about you, but still tell us about yourself, a little bit about yourself.
Um, I like to call myself a Renaissance woman because I am multifaceted. My hands are in many pies. So I am a professional educator, academic, as you would have said just now in my bio. But I'm also creative. I've been involved in the arts for as long as I can remember. I'm a writer, as you just said. I love poetry. I love spoken word poetry. I love all the arts, really. Music, dance, visual arts, photography. I've been married for 36 years, so I've been married really long. So I think I have something to say with respect to marriage, apart from my training, in terms of experience. And my husband and I, we have 3 wonderful sons who are all very creative young men, very well known in the creative sector in Barbados, in terms of graphic design, video, fine arts, fashion, that type of thing. So we are blessed. We are a blessed family. We work very well together. We do lots of projects together. And yeah, that's just a little bit.
Yeah, thank you for that. We have some persons in the comment section who are actually giving their opinion to what I think marriage is. We've been speaking about it previously before you got on. Just want to highlight a comment here from Kevin. Kevin is saying, "Good night, Kevin. Marriage is about respect, compromise, and working together."
Yeah.
Mario, good night, Romario. Romario is saying marriage is basically being able to put yourself in the other person's shoes and also having the we mindset and not the I mindset. Brad, sometimes persons get married because they want to have a sense of control and not because of love. Some people just like that they can get and don't want to lose the benefits of the person. Interesting. Good night, Sergio. Thank you for joining. So yeah, so last
that's
week,
one of my sons.
that's one of your sons.
Yeah. One of the tribe.
So last week we actually had part one to this discussion, and it was very good. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you again for everyone who's been a part of it. And we spoke more so on premarital. We didn't really dive into marriage, but we have a lot of young persons who watch and engage, and who I know definitely want to take their relationship to that next step. So tonight, we're going to learn all about what you should do, what you should or know to take your relationship to that next step. Now, we all should know by now that marriage is more than just a honeymoon, and more than just being able to spend the rest of your life with your best friend. There's so much more involved with marriage. So yeah, so one of the first questions like we would want to ask ourselves even before we consider marrying someone is, how do we know that that person is for us? Hope we know that that's the person that we should marry, because it's a huge decision that you're making. And I find that people don't take if your intent is to get married in the future, when you get in a relationship with someone, your mind should be okay. Getting in a relationship is a decision that is going to alter your life completely. If your intention is marriage, now I believe that you should vet that relationship, vet that person, vet intentions, look at everything, look at red flags. Last week, someone was actually saying that what if your favorite color is red? Look at all those things. Look at all those things before you actually make that decision. Because when you get in a relationship with that person and your end goal is marriage, then you have to go through that whole process. And our society, in our generation especially, you'd realize people are getting 5 and 6 and 7 and 10 relationships before they're with the person that they're supposed to be with. So how can we kind of cut down on that and stop that from happening? So question to you, Dr. Charles, is how do we know that that person is for us?
Okay, I don't think that's a very important question, by the way, and it's an old question because it's a question when I was young that many of us as young people were obsessed with. I remember being a student at community college and being a part of the ICCF, and we sat around the lunch table very often, a very large group of us, discussing things like this. How do you know that you've met the right person, or that you're marrying the right person, or that it's God's will, etc. So it's not a new question. However, I think it's not an easy question to answer, simply because there are no pat answers, and there are no answers that fit every single couple. I know of stories where individuals met someone and married them, having known them only for a couple of months, and they're still married after several years, after decades, and those marriages lasted, or marriages are still on. I know of individuals who've been with people for a very, very long time, and the marriage didn't last, even though they thought they knew them inside out. When they got together, it was another ball game. I would say, and I'm going to speak to it from both experience and I guess in terms of my professional perspective. I think that it is important to know who you want to be married to. And when I say that, I mean what type of person. Who are you looking for? Who do you want to be your wife, or who do you want to be your husband? I think that is the first thing you need to iron out. And that goes with respect to things like values. What are the values that you want your spouse to have? Should they have values that are similar to yours? Should they have similar ideals to you? You may have come from two totally different backgrounds. I know lots of people talk about compatibility and they look at things like, oh, we went to the same type of school, or we both have university education, or we're in similar professions, we make similar money, our families are similar, and lots of people look at those ripple types of things in terms of finding their right person. However, I don't think it is always as easy as that, as looking at those types of external things. They may have some merit in some of them, but I think what is most important, or for me, certainly what has been most important, would be the intangibles. Things like values, things like attitudes to family, respect for parents. Because if you want to partner with someone for the rest of your life, it is important to find someone, not necessarily someone who has had a perfect relationship with their parents, but someone who still respects their parents in spite of whatever may have transpired in that family. So I think things like that, and looking at how the person treats their parents, how they treat their siblings, things like that can give you indicators as to whether that person is the right person. Things like their basic spiritual values and beliefs. You don't have to believe exactly the same thing in every area of spirituality or in every area of Christianity if you are a Christian. But I think there should be core things that you hold dear. Things like, how do you feel about raising a family? Do both of you feel the same way? I know of one couple who I knew them when they were younger, and when they got married, I think she wanted a child, but he didn't. And that might have been, as far as I was told, one of the things that caused the relationship to end, right? So things like that are things that must be discussed. Having said that, however, we must also recognize that we evolve, and the things we may value in our 20s may not be the things that we value in our 30s. I remember a young man when I used to go to the Wesleyan church many years ago. He was adamant that he did not want a child. I mean, he was adamant, I want no children. Very wonderful young man. He wanted none, And I always told him, never say never. You are too young to say something like that. And now he is in his 40s. I think he has 2 sons. You understand what I'm saying? So obviously he changed his mind. So I'm saying that sometimes when we are of a particular age, we have certain beliefs about ourselves. We have certain beliefs about what is important to us. But those things change or will change as we get older. So even though we may have specific values or ideals in place, I think there must still be a level of openness in terms of understanding that we may change our mind, we have different views later on. So I think it is important to have these types of discussions with ourselves, and also to have this type of discussion with that person that we are considering marrying, right? I think prayer is an extremely huge part of it. Certainly it is a strategy that I employ myself. I got married very young. And even though I got married young, I was mature enough to understand that God still had to be a part of my marriage and a part of our relationship. And even though our relationship at the get-go was far from perfect, I mean, we had a lot of adjustments to do because each of us brought a different type of baggage to the marriage. And we didn't have the benefit of these types of sessions like what y'all are doing. So kudos to you as young people for having these types of conversations, because certainly back in our time, they weren't very popular. And maybe in the first few years of our marriage, fortunately for us, we were able to connect with a couple group, but that was for people who were already married and so on. But we still learned a lot. We read a lot on our own and that type of thing. But I'm saying that even though everything may seem perfect and well lined up, this person might seem like the best person for you. They tick all the boxes. There've been no red flags, but yet that marriage can break down. So there's a risk in getting married. I want to say that up front. There is a risk in getting married. I don't care how spiritual you are, how close to God you are. There is a risk in getting married, because at the end of the day, you are marrying an entirely different person. And very often that person you're marrying does not show their complete self. You don't see the complete person, no matter how much you love them, how much you're in love with them and they're in love with you. They genuinely love you and you genuinely love them. You don't see everything. You can't see everything. You can't see everything after seeing somebody for 2 months, 2 years, 5 years even. You don't see everything. There are always going to be surprises, right? And what is critical is learning how to live with those surprises, adapting and adjusting to those surprises, and ensuring at least that nothing that happens is a significant enough deal breaker to cause the relationship to come apart. And also having similar ideals about commitment, because I tell people all the time, you don't need commitment when things are romantic and going rosy and beautiful and wonderful. You know, when you're on the honeymoon and you're drinking all the honey, you don't need commitment then because you're already besotted by love. But you need commitment when things start to go rough. You can't stand the person that you're married to and you're wondering why they make this choice. That is when commitment is required.
Thank you. Thank you. That was a lot to take in. There was a lot of great information. It was just analyzing everything. This really wasn't a counseling session with you and you just like. Yeah. So thank you very much for that. I don't know if Shamora, Tiana has anything to add.
Yeah, people have something to add. I like that you spoke about values, but then how do the issue of compromising in a relationship, blending to everything. I know you mentioned about the person who wasn't really fond of having children before, but then no. But in that case, should we honor our our partner's opinion and just settle on it, or should we continue into the push and see if it may change?
I think that this is something that each couple must take as it comes, and it will be different for different couples. As I said just now, there are going to be deal breakers. There are going to be things that you absolutely will not want to compromise on. For example, I always imagined myself being a mother from as far back as I can remember. Being a mother was extremely important to me. At one point in time, I wanted 7 children. My husband and I, before we got married, we used to say we wanted 7 and then we went to 5 and then 3. But having children was extremely important to me. It would have been extremely difficult if I found out after getting married that my husband didn't want children. That would have been that would have been a significant deal breaker for me, because I just couldn't imagine my life without that opportunity. And some people might say, well, suppose you couldn't have a child, suppose you couldn't carry a pregnancy, but there's always adoption or there's fostering. But the idea of having a child in my life would be always a top priority for me. Fortunately, my husband had the exact same value. That's just one example. But what about things like spending money? Some people are misers and hoarders, and they don't want to spend anything on anything. They like to save every single cent. And that might seem very good, especially if you're single and it's just you. But when you're married now and your partner wants to at least take a trip every year or every other year, or they want to go to dinner once a month, or, they love to splurge on nice clothes and outfit the home really well, not that they waste the money, but they can appreciate that they make money and they like to spend a little of it. But, if you have a different value system where something like that is concerned, how do you strike a compromise? And I think these things require maturity. There are certain things that will be easier to compromise on than others because, it's just a day-to-day happening. It's not earth-shattering. It's not something that is going to affect you for the rest of your life. So you can compromise on those types of things easier. But things that reach to the core of how you define yourself, those things are going to be a lot more challenging to compromise on. And sometimes if you give up entirely your power to your partner, while I do believe in mutual submission as well as submission of wife to husband, because the Bible speaks both, there's no choice between the two. You have women submitting to the wife, submitting to the husband, and you also have both of them submitting to each other. So while that does exist, at the same time, we have to be careful that we don't give up a part of ourselves where we feel as if, I'm losing who I am, or I'm losing what's most important to me. So I think those are discussions that we need to have with our partner, and there must be a willingness to give and take so that situations come out being a win-win. At the same time, there are going to be times when one person will give in to the next, and and it doesn't take away from who you are for you to give in, to your partner. So you might have been some person who never liked vacationing abroad. It was never on your agenda, but your spouse loves it a lot, and you decided to give into it and travel yearly. And that doesn't take away anything from you. It doesn't stop you from being a person, So there are things like that you should be willing to compromise on, and the spouse should also be willing to sit it up sometimes and do something else that you would prefer to do. So that kind of compromise requires a lot of maturity and a lot of negotiation, because we all sometimes can be very selfish and we want it only our way. And that is why it is so important to have these discussions before you get married about as many things as possible. You can't cover everything, but about as many things as possible. The critical important things certainly should not be pushed on the back burner.
That's true. All right, Dr. Charles. So for me, I have found that many young people aren't really interested in marriage. The younger generation. For some people, it might seem to be old school, and then for others, they prefer to move at their own pace, because it will cause, as you were mentioning earlier, for some level of selflessness. And generally, I hold the position that we have become more selfish as a society on a whole. I was doing some research on the topic, and what I found is that marriage rates were higher from within the 1970s up to about 2000. And then we saw a drastic decline. And also, especially for men, they are less likely to be interested in marriage. And it had me thinking as to what was the reason, what's the cause of this in our society. And I think it's because of how we are raised, how children are raised and coming into adulthood. I think it's because we don't share as much as we used to in times past. So, for example, for my parents coming up, they would have grown up in a larger family unit, and they had to share with the cousins and the other siblings that they had. Now, first of all, we find that young people tend to also be less interested in having many children. It was interesting. What I found as well is that due to the level of education or free education, the inception of free education, you actually saw a decline also in the birth rates. So obviously, women then have used education as a form of independence, and they are less likely to commit to a relationship where the male partner is not serving his purpose. So what I found is women generally, I can't speak for everybody, they would generally look for security in a relationship. Men tend to prefer respect. So that's interesting because it tends to play off gender's weaknesses. I take the position that women are emotionally stronger than men. I know I may get some licks for that, but that's my position. I think women are emotionally stronger than men. Men are physically stronger than women. On the physical side, men, we will always dominate. But on the emotional side, I guess it's because of motherhood and the natural gift to nurture and love, to always be selfless for somebody. I think that plays a role in women being emotionally strong. And you tend to find then is that a lot of young men don't find marriage as being something that's attractive, because now I am giving my life or committing myself to someone. And as you said, it's always a risk. And then I get hurt. So because of the lack of that emotional strength, men fear the hurt and the pain that could result from infidelity in a marriage. So they avoid it altogether. And they do whatever brings them happiness, I guess, multiple relationships. Not saying that because you don't want to be married means that you just want to live wealth. I think is more than that, but generally I think that's the issues from within our generation. It is societal at large, and is something that we need to, especially for young men, we really need to educate young men to be more emotionally aware, to be more emotionally intelligent, because we focus a lot on the intellectual intelligence and stuff, for the maths and the English and the stats and the sciences, but we really need to, because I think that's the reason why marriages are not that appealing one of all, and we have such a low success rate of it. Because, not saying women don't do stuff too in a relationship or in a marriage, but I think it's just that sometimes men just don't find it attractive.
You've made some really excellent observations, really, and a lot of what you've said is so true. And this is something that I have, discussed with other young people or other people in general, in terms of how our society has changed and our values have changed, and a lot of that, you know, I think in terms of Barbados, we have tapped in a lot to global cosmopolitan values, which in many respects is primarily, those values are primarily very self-serving. And we live in a very self-oriented society, and there's nothing wrong with loving yourself and taking care of yourself, okay? Because I'm an advocate of self-care. I just wrote a book which focuses a lot on self-development. So I am an advocate for self-care. I'm an advocate for, going after your dreams and your goals and that type of thing. But I think too far east is west. And I think we've forgotten the value of community. We have forgotten the value of family. And as I've said to people, when you get married and you decide to expand your family, you're not losing, you're adding value. My husband is a wonderful man, and having been a father and being a father to 3 sons, because even though they're adults, he still fathers them. That has made him into an even more wonderful person. Imagine what his life would have been like if he didn't have the privilege of fathering. And not only has he fathered our own biological sons, he has fathered several young people that we have come into contact with, because that's the type of couple that we are. We've had many young people come to our home, our children's friends, and many of them are still connected to us. When they see us, they hug us. Well, back in the day when you become people, they would hug us, or, they still relate to us as parents, as if we were their own parents, or their aunties or their uncle and that type of thing. And that's how we have been as a family. And I think being able to give to others, other young people, whether at your church, if at the level of the school, you might not be a teacher, but you might be able to reach out to young people in the schools, if you can have your own children, fine, reach out to other extended family in your family. I think that idea of giving and of community, if we're not careful, we're going to lose it in the age of meism, right? I call it the age of the selfie. Everything is self-focused. And because of that, we, as I said, we've gone too far to the other side. It was just like women's lib. Women were marginalized. Women definitely were not being paid as much as men. Women were being sexually objectified. There were a lot of negative things happening to women, and women were right to fight for their own advancement, for their rights. Nothing was wrong with that. But too far east became west, and women began to hate on men. Women began to see themselves as not needing men, as it were, when God created us to coexist together, to work together, not to be opposing each other, but to work together, right? Side by side. So I think sometimes with revolutions, that happens, with social revolutions. And because we've been in an age where, people said, many times in the past, you saw these movies with these women who were traditional housewives, and then they said, oh, their lives passed them by. They gave all their life to their children, and all that they're in their 40s or 50s, they're living for themselves, and all that type of thing. But then again, it starts out where your values are and what is most important to you. You mean I'm an educated woman. I was sort of like, I used to define myself a lot back in the day as a near traditionalist because I've always held traditional values, in terms of home and raising a family and that type of thing. But yet, as an educated woman, I mean, I was a university student when I got married. I was a university student when I had my first son. And having a career was extremely important to me, but my children were always my priority. So I sacrificed and I stayed home, not earning a salary that I could have earned as a graduate, to make sure my son got to 2 years where I was breastfeeding him, because that to me was more important than earning money, And when I had my other child, my middle child, which was Sergio, I did a similar thing. I stayed home deliberately, but I could do that because my husband was working and with him until a certain time, and then I went out to work. So it's about what is most important to you. I believe women can have it all. I believe it's just a matter of juggling your time. And having it all does not mean having it 100%. Everything at 100%. There are going to be times when you will sacrifice for your children. There are many times when I sacrificed for my children when they were small. But as they grow older, obviously they get more independent. You don't have to be babysitting them. They can go out. You can drop them here, pick them back up. Then they start to drive or get dropped by their friends. And, life changes as your children get older. So they're not going to be small forever. But enjoy the moments, because many of us now who have grown children, sometimes we look back and we say, where did the time go? How did they get to this age? It's like it went by in a blur. But yet when you were living it, it felt like so much activity, dropping them here, taking them there, going to the school, blah, blah, blah. But I don't regret any of it, So it's about what you value as an individual. And as you said, that change in our society is definitely there. And there's need for a lot of education where we can see the value in giving back to society, giving back to community, building community, and not just living for ourselves. And I think when we have that type of frame of reference, that it will impact how we see relationships, because everything is interconnected. Your relationship is a community. It's a community of husband and wife. And eventually it will expand and become a wider community. And marriages, I know years ago, we used to sit under the ministry of P.C. Griffith. And he always said to us that marriage is a ministry, because you minister to your partner ministers back to you. When you all get children, that ministry should continue. And as you expand your reach, you minister to other young people, you interface with other people in your community, your expanded family, and you move away from being self-focused to being other-focused. And that is what Christ has called us to be. It doesn't mean that everybody's going to have a whole set of people in their house. I don't mean it that way. You might do it differently. You might decide, well, look, I'm going to give to this family that lives down the road or that lives in this particular community. And I don't even want to do it in a way that is obvious. I could do it secretly. I could find out what their needs are and find a way to meet their needs in a way that does not rob them of their sense of dignity and that type of thing, so that you don't live for yourself only, but you live for community. And I think that is what marriage was always intended to be. Remember, God is a relational God. He said, let us make man. Why did God make man? The Godhead existed. They communed among themselves, the three of them, Father, Son, and Spirit. One God, but three persons. And why did he decide to create man and woman? Because they wanted to have a relationship with us. And that's what we're supposed to do. We're replicating what God did. So marriage is about community. It's about relationship, building relationships.
Okay.
Thank you for that. I just find it funny how everything that we speak about, all the Lewwe chat episodes, every topic that we touch, everything leads back into family. Like the root is always family. Mm-hmm. And how your upbringing was, how that family environment was. Like our first episode was parents and mental health. Myself and straight. Like everything just leads back into family and the upbringing, because the society comes from the seed that is sown in that family.
That's right.
Community. So family, our current family is so important, and what happens there at home is so important and so vital for what goes on into society. So I love that. And I just want to talk about a bit, like, preparation for marriage. So for a couple who's looking to get married, serious, they think they know each other well, they think they're both serious about, getting married and that kind of stuff. And in terms of counseling, when should they seek counseling? Is it okay to seek counseling before you are engaged? Do you wait till you're engaged? And what are your thoughts on counseling, marital, and even throughout marriage itself?
Well, again, you know me, I am the no rules of thumb person, because I think that different couples require different things. Obviously, for younger, more inexperienced people, they may want to be counseled even before they're engaged, because they may want to be sure before they engage to each other. You know, so you might have been going for a while, but you want to make sure that this is really the right decision you're making. And for the really brave ones, they may decide, well, let's go into this pre-engagement counseling. And if this counseling exposes that we really shouldn't get engaged at this point, we won't. You know, not sure that many people do that, but I know that that type of counseling is available. So that's pre-engagement counseling. And then the counseling that I think most people opt for is the premarital counseling, where you've already set your date, you know you're getting married, and you know that you want to go through some sessions prior to marriage. And that can range from 4 sessions to 6 sessions to more if you require more. So I think that you shouldn't skip on something like this. You will know what your needs are as a couple. And I think there are programs that are deliberate. We have a program and we usually do 6 weeks. Some people might just prefer to do 4 weeks. For example, we've counseled people who've been living together for a while. They've been living together for a while. They know each other really well. They may have a family already, a child, etc. They're getting married. That's not the same scenario as a couple who's never been together, you know, who's never lived in the same house. Those scenarios are different. So they're going to require, their needs are going to be different. So it is for couples to know what their needs are, and to also find a counselor who is flexible and who understands that needs should be tailored to that particular couple. But premarital counseling is critical. And I always think there should be a level of openness to it. I like the idea of pre-engagement counseling, or counseling even before you get really close to the wedding, so that you give yourself enough scope to change your mind, yes, or even delay. You might not say, well, you know, I still love the person. I don't think a counseling session will make you think, well, I don't want to marry this person. But certainly it might confront you with some stuff that you need to work through first, or that it might be better for you to work through first. Because many of us back in the day, we got married, we didn't have the benefit of this type of counseling, and we had to work through our stuff, you know, on the fly. But you have the opportunity now, you have the knowledge, and I think you should allow it to work for you. So yes, I do encourage marriage counseling as one of the methods of preparation. But then there's marriage counseling and there's marriage counseling. You know, I counseled a couple a few years back, and this young man was the son of a pastor. And, you know, obviously I'm going to be as general as possible, but, you know, in his premarital counseling sessions, there was never any mention about sex. None. Zero mention of sex. And he was having a sexual issue in his marriage, right? So, as I said, there's counseling and there's counseling. So you want to make sure that you find someone who is really going to be upfront with you, because you shouldn't just pop into a counselor. I think you should find out from that counselor how they approach the counseling, what topics they deal with. You know, the onus is on you to find out what that person or that couple, because sometimes couples do counseling, what they give, so that you can ensure that you're going to be adequately prepared. So apart from that type of formal arrangement, I think there's also scope for something like mentorship, being around married people. You plan to be married, get friends with married people. Don't wait till you get married to get friends with married people. Have friends that are married. You know, not only people in your age group either, but older married people who've been married for a while. You know, you might not be their bosom friends because you might think, oh, they're older than I am, but you know, you have different types of relationships, and I think you should be around healthy marriages. You should have insight by being around people who are married. You should have friends who are married. So that type of informal mentorship is also a way to gather information. Reading books. Well, a lot of people might not read books today, but you have a lot of websites. You know, there are lots of articles that you can access. There are lots of videos for those who love. People prefer to watch videos these days, or watch shows, or listen to podcasts. So there's a lot of information out there that you can gather about marriage and relationships that can help prepare you. but there's no one-stop shop for everybody. I think it's diverse, it's dynamic. You have to find the best fit for you. And even after you've gotten married, don't neglect your relationship. I always say that we benefited tremendously by being a part of a couples group after we got married, and that taught us so much. It taught us so much, and that was back in the 80s. And even though people weren't necessarily open about discussing their own relationships as people are today, because I think, again, it's the social media culture has helped us a lot to tell our stories in ways that we weren't comfortable doing in the past. But you would still get little snippets of things. You could pick things from in between the lines of things that people said, and you got to understanding that you weren't the only one going through a particular struggle or a particular challenge, and that helped you. You left those sessions feeling empowered, to work on your relationship. And that definitely benefited us. We did that for perhaps the first maybe 4 or 5 years of our marriage. We were going every month to a couples group, and that helped us tremendously. So I encourage young people. I think there's still people who do those things. There's still couples groups, and I think it's great to get into those types of sessions. They will help develop you, definitely, and being friends with people who are married.
Okay, great. I just want to highlight a question here from Mario. Mario is asking, how big of an influence is vulnerability, mutual vulnerability, to the success of relationships?
Now that is huge. Mutual vulnerability, that's one of the values that I tout a lot. And mutual, because it should come from both individuals, both the man and the woman. One of you said earlier that women are emotionally stronger, and that is because we are raised differently. Perhaps there may be something in our DNA or in our genes that make it easier for us to be articulate in terms of right brain, left brain. There may be things like that we are easier with words and with language. Although you will get some men who are like that as well. I'm speaking generally. A lot of it has to do with our socialization, how we were raised, and we raise our girl children to articulate their feelings. We let them cry. Girls tend to befriend each other. They expose, all their little secrets to each other and that type of thing. And that, I think, those kinds of practices with girl children develop certain skills in them, so that when they become adults, they're able to transition and experience all of their relationships differently, including their relationships with their girlfriends. And then when they get into a relationship with marriage, they're able to transition well. Men now are raised differently. Generally speaking, not raised to express their emotions, discouraged from crying and that type of thing. So when they get, and I'm speaking generally because I didn't raise my sons like that. I allowed my sons to cry when they're children, and I was very aware as a parent. So I applied a lot of the knowledge I had to how I raised my children. And even in terms of them having cooking toys, they had cooking toys as boys, and my husband does a lot of cooking, and they also can all cook, So I didn't stereotype thing with their boy children, so they can't have cooking toys. So I think that how we raise our children, what we expose them to, helps us to develop in terms of how we navigate our relationship. So that whole question of mutual vulnerability is very, very important. But I also think it is a skill that can be learned. I think if a woman is smart, she can guide, coax her husband or her significant other into being more emotionally vulnerable, but she can't bludgeon him into it. She can't nag him into it, because men are different creatures, and a man has to feel safe, and as you said, he has to feel respected. And the more a man is respected and feels, that respect coming from the woman in his life, the more he will be comfortable opening up.
True. Yeah.
If I may ask a question.
Yes, go ahead.
In terms of the whole vulnerability aspect, what do you suggest is the best way in terms of males to address them, to get on the emotional level of a woman in a relationship? What do you
That's a very tough one, because men and women are so different. I think number one, women need to take the pressure off of men and don't expect men to be just as they are. Number one, that's the first thing. You will find some men who who do have ease in terms of expressing their emotions because of how they're raised, or they may just be sensitive men, because we have this stereotype that men are rough and not sensitive and in touch with their emotions, which is not true, because we do have a whole set of men who are very in touch with their feelings, who also have great intuition when it comes to the women in their lives and so on. So you do have men like that. So I think that a woman needs to model what she wants to see and what she wants to have in her relationship. So you want emotional vulnerability, model it. Be emotionally vulnerable with your spouse or your partner, and show him what it means to be emotionally vulnerable. And if he doesn't replicate exactly what you're looking for, don't bludgeon him into it, especially in critical moments when there's been arguments and that type of thing. When the relationship is strong or it is going through a strong point, and you know both of you are in a very good mood, and you're having a conversation about yourselves or your lives, your relationship, that's a great time to bring up, you know, the whole question of vulnerability and what it means to you. You might not even use that word vulnerability, but it's just about helping him to see how important his being open to you and him not hiding anything from you is. And you know, those are the types of qualities that have to be fostered in the relationship so that they develop naturally. You know, it's not something that you're putting on, because you can't put on vulnerability. You have to do something that's natural, that actually emerges out of intimacy. So it's about the intimacy of the relationship. How intimate is your relationship in terms of how you expose yourselves to each other? There should be things that you're comfortable talking to your partner about that you wouldn't tell another person. Right? And when you do that, when you open up yourself and you tell your partner things about your past, things you've done, or dreams that you have, you know, that is how emotional vulnerability is established. It is established through communication. So if y'all are not talking, if y'all are not spending time together, if y'all going to just lay them on the bed sometimes and talk or stare into the ceiling and, you know, be quiet with each other even, because even in those moments, it's like drawing on each other's spirit. You know, if there are no moments like that in your relationship, then how are you going to, you know, intimacy is not only about sex. So I think that we have to understand the whole question of emotional intimacy and spiritual intimacy, and begin to develop these aspects of the relationship even prior to marriage, so that when you become married, you know, it is much easier to flow again in that vein, you know, of self-exposure, self-disclosure, and that type of thing, because you want to separate your significant relationship from any other relationship that you have. So there has to be something uniquely different about this relationship.
Yeah. Just quickly, Rashida was saying that is not a woman's responsibility. Rashida, I would just like you to elaborate on what point specifically you're referring to, so we can come back to that. Tunisia, then, why is it that some men think because they marry you, they own you?
They own you. I think that again comes out of, you know, traditional perspectives of what it means for a man to be a man. You know, that whole idea of a man owning a woman and dominating a woman and controlling a woman has been the narrative of our relationships in the Caribbean for so long. And we know that a lot of it has emerged out of dysfunctionalism, you know, dysfunctionality. And it's not about love, is never about owning somebody. Never. And for those who want to control you, dictate everything about you, you know, what you wear, how you wear your hair, what color you can wear, and, you know, everything they want to dictate about your life, something is wrong with that. That is not a healthy relationship. It's not healthy behavior. So marriage should never be about ownership. Yes, there are men who think that way. And when your spouse expresses, you know, those types of sentiments, it is a sign that there is a problem in the relationship that will require some level of intervention, some level of confrontation, some level of discussion, some level of counseling, depending on how serious it is and how much it's impacting the relationship.
I just want to bring out one scripture here, so if y'all would allow. No, you know that we hear the scripture in Colossians, wives must submit to your husbands as fitting to the Lord. No, we hear this a lot, right? But we don't usually hear the follow on, which is husbands, love your wives and do not be harsh with them. Now, I think this also plays in, well, especially in Christian households. You would have, some husbands who like to be very authoritative, and the guys like to hear, well, the boys must submit. But when they never talk about them having to love and not to be harsh or bitter towards wives. So that's something that definitely.
The thing about those verses is that men need to understand who the verses are addressed to.
Mhm.
The verse tells husbands to love their wives. That is their purview. The husband's purview is not to tell his wife to submit. The moment you have to tell your wife to submit, you have a problem. Because submission must be voluntary. Submission, by the very nature of the word, cannot be forced. I cannot be forced to submit. That is not what submission is. If I'm being forced to submit, then something is wrong, right? Husbands need to look at their command. They are commanded to love as Christ loved the church and gave himself for it, which in essence is really a much higher order command than the command to submit, right? And as I said earlier, while that verse does say, wives, submit to your own husbands, and I do agree with that, the Bible also says, submit you one to another. So in the context of a marriage. So that means submission is also mutual. So there is scope in a relationship for a husband to give way to submitting, in terms of a mutual discussion and compromise, in the same way that there is that requirement for the wife. But at the end of the day, if there is to be a deal breaker decision, or there's a stalemate about a particular thing, somebody has to have the final word, and that's how I see submission. Somebody has to have the final say when y'all can't come to an agreement, because there are times when you can't come to an agreement. And I think that if a lot of husbands looked at loving their wives as Christ loved the church, and look at the model of love that Christ demonstrated, because it said love your wives as Christ loved the church. It didn't say love your wives as any other thing. It said as Christ loved the church and gave. The love of Christ was a sacrificial love. We just celebrated it here over this weekend, right? It was a sacrificial love. He gave his own life. He washed his disciples' feet. He inverted the leadership triangle. The leader was washing the feet of his followers. He served his followers. How many husbands are going to wash their wives' feet? How many husbands are willing to serve their wives and love them from that space of servanthood? When you love your wife from the space of servanthood, there will be no issue with submission, none whatsoever. But when you want to be the bully and the bad John, and you want to demand and command, then that's not the love of Christ. And it's just so simple. It's never a deal breaker for me, because it is just so simple. It is just so simple. Love with the heart of a servant, and submission will never be an issue.
It's true. It's true. Yeah. So Tiana, Shamar, y'all want to jump in anytime?
Yeah. Well, moving on now in terms of young people that they were in a relationship for a few years, and you thought a marriage has come up, the discussion with the partner, and next steps in terms of finding a source where you can confide in as a young man. And I think because you don't have many examples of, well, also the church. Let's put it that way. You will find examples in the church of good husbands, faithful husbands, most of the time.
That's a sad indictment.
But outside of the church, you don't tend to, pardon? But outside of the church, you don't tend to find a lot of men really being interested in marriage. So you have friends that might not be typical church members. Is sometimes very challenging, because as we know, you are the average of the 5 people, 10 people that you spend the majority of your time around. And obviously, if you have friends who are not very interested in marriage, subconsciously believe it can have an impact on you, the individual. You might not think of it as, well, they are influencing my relationship and my decision to take it further or be more interested and serious. But I believe that subconsciously you tell yourself, well, you know what, they're in relationships and them happy, I ain't one, I happy, so why put the extra stress? Because you might see marriage now as something that would be more stressful. Like, I hear a comment made often from a lot of men that say, from the time you get married, the person changes. So I don't know what causes the person to change, but I think from the comment that was made earlier when they say from the time a man marries, he thinks he owns the wife. And I think on the flip side, men sometimes tell themselves, well, and I'm going to be honest, I think this is a serious thing with young people, considering the fact that we are more selfish as individuals now than before. Young people will question marriage because then you have to split everything that you have in half, and then the way you was raised, because you were raised with the perspective that you were supposed to accomplish and acquire as much as you could. For you now to have to share this, then subconsciously you tell yourself, I think I'm better off not going to that step. So again, it all links back to the emotional intelligence of individuals, and especially for young men, because what we find in our society now, young men are more interested in, I would consider, just keeping up appearances. I mean, all right, when you're young, it's understandable that you will explore and you will have friendships with many individuals. It doesn't have to be sexual, but you will have friendships, relationships with other persons. The challenge that a lot of young men find is that that's like the gold standard. That's what we are taught to pursue in life. If you go and you watch any of the popular videos that the young people like to watch, that's where you're going to see. You're not going to see a video most often with a man and a woman, and he's only about her, and they're in love, and he's pursuing her. You find it that he wants the money, he wants the women, he wants all the flashy stuff, and that's what competes now with young people actually being interested in marriage. And I think being toxic right now is something that is just widely accepted, to be honest. I mean, I'm not saying that each of us don't have our flaws. Every single one of us are imperfect, and we need to be aware of the flaws that we have, and then see like how we can work on it, because we like to put a lot of blame on the other person. And I think that's something that every person would rather put the blame on someone else. It's not my fault that this happened. It's not my fault that happened. And again, it comes from that lack of emotional intelligence. I know people might get tired of hearing it, but I think there's something that needs to be drilled into the minds of individuals, that we should not only pursue the academic intelligence, but we really need to get to know ourselves better. Because if we go into a marriage, the thought of considering marriage should mean that you have a grasp of who you are as an individual, what you can tolerate, what you can accept from someone else, what you really know about yourself as well. So the counseling as well has a bad connotation. That's an issue that we have in the Caribbean for sure, where people only think of counseling as something that is if you have problems.
Yeah.
Or so if you consider going to marriage counseling, then got bare problems. If you go to a psychologist or a psychiatrist, is a madman. And it's that thinking that we need to change, because if you are not feeling well, you go to the doctor. You don't think twice. I mean, somebody might tell you, take 2 Panadols or get some rest or go to the pharmacy and stuff. But at the end of the day, when you realize the situation is not improving, you go to the doctor. When it comes now to the psychological challenges that we face as individuals, we all do face them. I don't care how intelligent you are, knowledgeable you are, we all have breaking points as individuals. And we must be able to find that space where we can be our true selves, because a lot of times we tend to fake a lot of stuff in society. So in psychology, when we mention about the id, ego, the super ego, the ego is trying to find the balance, right? But you're trying to put on a mask to the public of I'm happy and all that sort of stuff. But deep inside, you know that you have some challenges that you need to work on. But then you tell yourself, no, I can't go to marriage counseling because nothing wrong with me, or I can't go to a psychiatrist or psychologist because somebody can think I'm mad. But we need to invert that mindset within society somehow, somewhere, because I don't think that the concept of marriage is going to change until people can see that this is the space where God has allowed man and woman to come together to really nurture each other, to really build each other. As you said, it's family, it's selflessness, and we need to take back that power and bring it back into the family. We've externalized everything. You have, from the time a child is 3 months, did in nursery and stuff, the things that you did, which you would have made sacrifice to raise your children. I know that there are some women who might not be in a financial position to do that stuff. So that's understandable. But again, maybe if you have a family member that they're not working, that maybe older in retirement, and they're able to help out that sort of stuff, I think that we have to work together as a society in order for us to see the changes, because one of my biggest issues is that we like to blame everybody else. We blame the government, we blame the neighbor, we just like to point fingers, right? But until we become self-aware of what we need to do as an individual to be better, then I think that will help to make families and marriage something that was how God designed it to be, something that's a true blessing for those that are involved.
That's right. That's right.
I think that's a toxic mindset that we have right now, where we as a society, we think that we can handle everything on our own. We don't think we deserve help. And instead of working together, we work against each other. And that's how all, I guess, these negative practices, they start to show up in society. And then we have to understand, and I think, and that's what I am trying to understand what has happened with past generations, with our grandparents and stuff. And now a lot has changed, and we have to understand that if we do not tackle this situation, our children will, children mirror what they see. So if it is that we don't tackle this situation, the generational curse, I guess you could say, will continue if you don't tackle the situation.
That's right.
It's true. Yeah, I just want to highlight a couple comments from Mario. Mario is saying, honestly, most men outside of the church don't have that male role model but guide them and lead into considering marriage. That's related.
But many.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was wondering, what about the fact that so many people decide to live together, and I'm talking about people outside of the church.
Yeah.
Lots of couples live together. So living together certainly is still pretty popular. But marriage is seen as the next step in terms of commitment. So people will live together for years, but when it comes to the idea of marriage, they're terrified. So I think because we live in a society where the value of marriage has been pulled down, really, by the whole idea of people living together. And I'm not saying that to be judgmental, because not everybody is, going to have Christian values or will want to be married. But I'm just saying that, the idea that, okay, we can just live together, so there's no big deal. Marriage is just going to church and saying something in front of the priest. It doesn't mean it. But people don't understand of it. They don't understand marriage as a covenant. So it's not just about deciding to go and live this, but it's actually covenanting. So this is at another level of commitment. Because you could go and decide to live in a house with anybody. You could live in a house for 10 months with one buddy, and then the next year you could live in it with another person, and so on. And I'm not saying that people who live in houses with people don't also have serious relationships, because we know from our own social framework here in the Caribbean that many of our parents or parents lived together and they did not marry, right? So, but they lived with their partner for a very long time. They were what we would call common law marriages, long-term commitments, not hopping into a new partner every 5 years or every year. So even though they may never have formalized their marriages, we know that our legal framework still accepts their common law union as a significant union. And many of us were raised in those types of unions. So I'm not, trying to point the finger at anyone. I'm just saying that I don't think that there is the full understanding of what marriage is. So even when people say, people might have been living together for 10 years and they're still terrified of getting married. And so once, as you said, once you get married, you're going to change. How are you changing? What is going to change you? Or what is going to change the texture of our relationship that makes it different from what we had? I think admitting what that change should look like or what it is what is most important. Because it means something. You're actually now committing before God and man. You're covenanting your life to this person. That's a very, very serious thing to do. So yes, it is different. It is a different step from just living together. It is a different step. And I think we need to have those discussions about what marriage really means. What is it? What does a covenant mean? The world just looks at marriage as a contract, and we know there are contractual arrangements in marriage. There are legal contractual arrangements in marriage. But from our perspective, we know it is more than a contract. So it is a contract, but there's also the whole element of covenant, a spiritual covenant. Some churches call it a sacrament, the sacrament of marriage. It is something very, very, very serious that you shouldn't enter into lightly. You shouldn't enter into it with the idea that if this don't work, we're going to walk away next year. That kind of flippant mentality that also exists today, that marriage is just something you change out and you change in. Now, I'm not saying that sometimes there aren't legitimate reasons for people to get divorced, because there are. And the Bible also speaks to divorce. There are, legitimate reasons sometimes why people do have to get divorced. But I'm talking about a mentality which sees marriage as expendable, easily expendable. We don't want to have that. So I think there's need for a lot of teaching, a lot of role modeling, of those who do have successful marriages. I think men who are married and doing well in the church, both young and experienced men, need to talk to other men. I think there need to be fora where men can get together and men can be vulnerable with each other. I know that we often think this is not the way of men, but I know there are a lot of men who are willing to talk, and there are a lot of men who are looking to hear from other men. So I think having those kinds of conversations among men, in terms of how they view marriage, those who've been successful at marriage, what made their marriages successful, and how marriage has helped them and made them a better man. I think that having those kinds of honest conversations with men who are afraid of marriage could perhaps help them.
Thank you.
But people often say, and this is also true, that many men run from marriage for years until they find the right woman or who they think is right. There are men who sometimes they're with one woman for many years and they wouldn't marry her, and then they meet another woman, they marry her at the drop of a hat. And we know many instances where that happens, right? So it's a very complicated thing as well. It's pretty complex. It's pretty complex, and I think women have a responsibility to play as well in making themselves valuable to men and not easily expendable. But that's a different type of conversation.
Yeah, I believe we have so much that we have not unpacked yet, and we're already at time, But I thoroughly enjoyed the discussion. I hope everyone who's watching enjoyed the discussion as well and learned something.
I'm not hearing you somehow.
Oh,
I'm not sure.
Not sure why, because I believe
You're
I'm
hearing
on.
me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, okay. I'm not hearing you guys. I'm not sure.
Not sure what's happening here. 1 sec. Yeah. So for everyone who's joined us, we just really hope that you have learned something from the discussion and that you have a lot of takeaways. So thank you for joining. Not quite yet finished though. We still have some takeaways for you. So right now, I just want to, leave something with you, and Dr. Charles also leave something with Mr. Moore and Tiana. So yeah, we learned a lot about marriage, and if you are considering going to that next step, this counseling, each relationship should know what they require in order to go to the next step. Yeah, so just know what you need. You can remember, you can always back on this discussion at any time, right? Remember that. So yeah, so know that what you need and know what you require to take your relationship to the next step. Denise, Charles, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I'm hearing you. I'm hearing you now.
Oh, yeah, all right, cool. That's great. Yeah, so we're gonna wrap up. I just wanted you to, let us know, like, let's get into benefits of marriage, because a lot of people are afraid of being married, and we know it's not all strawberries and roses. But we do know that there are some benefits, and that you can have a happy marriage once both persons work at it. So, what are some of those benefits, or what should persons be looking forward to in marriage?
I think that marriage builds you and develops you. And I often say to people that I think it was a wonderful idea that God had when He placed man and woman together. We're not opposed to each other, but we are complementary. And I think the fact that God made us different, we have different temperaments, we approach things differently, we experience things differently. I think that is a part of divine design. I know we talk a lot about socialization, and socialization does impact how we develop and how we interface with marriage as men and women. But I think that a lot of the difference in man is also, between men and women, is also on account of divine design. Because together, maleness and femaleness, as represented in man and woman, is a representation of who God is, right? God, we were extracted from God Himself. And I think marriage was designed by God to help us to be better people. I think ultimately that's what it is. I think that when you become married, you're expected to learn selflessness. You're expected to learn to cooperate, to submit, to give way, to lead like a servant, and to give pleasure to someone else, because we haven't really spoken about sex, but sex is a big part of marriage. And the two becoming one is operationalized both at the level of the body and the spirit. And when the pastor in the church says, and I now pronounce you man and wife, or he talks about the two becoming one, I now pronounce you man and wife, we know that is operationalized in the sex act. So sex is it is not insignificant thing. It is an extremely important part of marriage, and it is designed to be it is the demonstration of all that God intended marriage to be. The oneness that exists both at the level of the body and at the level of the spirit, because sex is spiritual and it is not just physical. So yes, marriage is designed to build us up, to develop us, to make us better individuals. You should end up being a stronger person on account of being married. You should end up being a more selfless person. You should end up being someone who is who grows by leaps and bounds. And then if you are able to be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth as the Lord commands, once everything is working well, and you're able to do that, then that's another dimension that is being added to your person, because you are able to establish family. And if you are a Christian, even better, you're able to establish a godly family in the earth. And that's a tremendous responsibility, because you have you understand God and you understand the word, and you have the tremendous opportunity now to groom from your home a set of individuals who you can carry that message to, and you can demonstrate God's love to in terms of your children. Now, as our children go into adults, they make their own choices. They may not always follow our precepts or follow what we taught them. But the word says, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he's old, he will not depart. And we can hold on to that word from God. So I think marriage is a tremendous responsibility, but I also think it is a beautiful space for growth. It is a beautiful space for development, to just enjoy each other. There's so much you can do together. It teaches you togetherness. It teaches you selflessness, giving way to the other person, learning to compromise, learning to express your feelings, to be articulate, to communicate love, to experience trust and respect. If we do marriage the right way, we gain so much, we learn so much, and we create a secure foundation for the home that we are going to build together. And just to think of it, if there are more positive marriages out there, we are actually adding value to our community. We are adding value to our nation. And I heard this described so well years ago by someone, who said, we who understand God, we have to demonstrate family. We have to do it right. When we do it right, we are leading the way. We're demonstrating to society how it should be done. It doesn't mean we're going to be perfect. Nobody's perfect. No families are perfect, not even families in the church. So nobody's perfect. And the thing about being an imperfect family is being able to apologize in front of your children. Being able to say sorry. I shouldn't have spoken to mommy that way. I shouldn't have spoken to daddy that way. Or y'all apologizing to each other, having family conferences, having a sense of direction for this family. This is what this family is about. This is who we are. And when you raise your children in that type of environment, then they grow up into adults who can take that into their own family and establish their own family the way they see fit. So I think that there's so much that we can gain from marriage and the establishment of family that I don't think there's a book big enough to really hold all of it, but I think we can summarize and say that it adds value to the individual, and that value that is added to the individual is obviously added to the couple, added to the family, and then added to the society.
Yeah. You would have mentioned there's not a big enough book, but there are some books from Dr. Charles. Your baby is coming now. Push. How to have mind-blowing sex without losing your brain. And tonight I am butterfly celebrating seasons of change. So go get them.
These are all available. They're all available in Amazon Kindle store. So you can just go into Amazon Kindle store, put in my name, Denise J Charles. You must have the J, and the books will come up. Or if you want to get a physical book from me, the last book, I do have physical copies. I know some people like to have their own book to write it up. And this particular book is a book of 61 readings, and each one has a set of activities at the end. So it's really about developing yourself. There's stuff in there about relationships. There's stuff in there about life in general, about work, about leadership. So when you read this book, you're going to be in a much better place to be a better person. So if you want to get that particular book, feel free to contact me, reach out to me. I'm on social media, and I can also do curbside delivery for that book.
All right. Sounds good. Then, Dr. Charles, I cannot thank you enough for joining us tonight and being a part of this discussion. I mean, I'm going to be coming.
You're welcome. I'm really so pleased to see you as young people doing this. I love it. I love to support young people. I love young people, and I love to see young people doing positive things. And I think this is fantastic. I really do wish you all the best. Keep up the great work.
Thank you very much. It was great. So yeah. Yeah, guys, so we're at the end of our segment. Right now, we're going to take a short we do it. So see you guys shortly. So welcome back to Relationship Goals Part 2 with Dr. Denise Charles. Now, right now, I'm going to, just promote a small business. And again, can anyone guess what I'll be promoting? That's correct. Lewwe. So some exciting news for Lewwe this weekend. I know y'all have been buying wings. Y'all have been messaging me, telling me how good these wings taste. I know. I told y'all that these are the best wings in Barbados. So from this weekend, Lewwe is actually doing delivery. So you don't have to leave home to go to St. George anymore. Well, that's only if you're in St. James, if you're St. George, if you're St. Michael, Christchurch, and St. Philip. You can get your food delivered to you. If you're in any parish that was not listed, unfortunately, we do not have delivery as yet. But yeah, guys, this weekend, this Saturday, go and make your orders. Go and get some food, and yeah, it's gonna be great. So welcome back, Shamar and Tiana. Thank you again for coming on to the discussion. I really, you guys brought some valid points. You can just leave a takeaway with.
Well, let me. It's been a pleasure to be here with everyone tonight. I hope that everyone would have taken something, some seed of knowledge with them. For me, I think it was just a reminder of being more selfless as an individual and trying to help others. So whether that's within your partner or with other people in the community in general, just try to be a positive influence. Try not to be always, having that negative perspective on everything. But try to see the good in others and also see good in yourself, because I believe sometimes you might be a little too hard on yourself. Sometimes none of us are perfect, and practice self-love and also use that love then to nurture others as well. So that's my takeaway.
And I agree also. Denise, she made some very, very interesting points tonight. And as Shamar said, just practice self-love, practice growth, continue to realize within ourselves that we do need help, rely on each other, be positive, and, just grow and be happy. It's not going to be always easy, but with that partnership and relying on each other in that way, we can go for it.
Thanks. My takeaway is just, buy wings this weekend. No, but more seriously, to make your relationship work, you have to work on yourself. So, not everything is at your partner. It's to work on yourself, continue to work on yourself, and that eventually, spill over to your relationship, not just your romantic relationship, but your relationships anywhere else. So continue to work on yourself and invest in yourself, but don't be selfish. Be selfless. That's the only way your relationship or marriage is going to work. So yeah, again, thank everyone for joining us tonight. We will see you next week. Unfortunately, we only have 2 more episodes of Lewwe Chat. Yes, this is episode 6. We have 8 episodes in all. 2 more episodes, so make sure you come back and watch us next week. We have a very interesting discussion next week. And our very last discussion, I think all of you are going to I can't say too much about it right now, but you'll find out. So make sure you follow us on Instagram, subscribe, like, share this video. Remember, you can always go back and watch it at any time. So yeah, thank you everyone for joining, and we will see you next week on Lewwe Chat. Good night.
Night.
Good night.